Hi, this is Alexander Scott, a member of LANDS, presenting this edition of our weekly updates. Now, before we continue, please remember to visit our website at jalands.org or follow us on social media. Our Twitter handle is at lands_ja. First, we will begin with the scourge of femicide and violence against women, which is taking place in the island. Now, there's been a renewed call for Jamaica to reaffirm its stance on capital punishment, that is, for us to resume executions, and this renewed call for capital punishment has mainly come about since the recent horrific murder of Juan Kenice Jackson, as well as the rampant spate of femicide and otherwise violence against women which is taking place in this country. Now, while this discussion has been an ongoing one, it's been going on for quite some time, and while a lot of the discussion has been taking place, in particularly on social media, it's also taking place in all aspects of life. So you cannot go to, well, pre-pandemic, you couldn't go to a bar, for example, without the topic coming up. You cannot read an article in the newspaper. You can't read the opinion pieces in the newspaper without coming across somebody who is mentioning capital punishment as a possible solution to not just all violent crimes in Jamaica, but particularly the violent crimes against women. Now, capital punishment executions, it's still on the books in Jamaica, but we haven't carried out an actual execution since 1988. And this is because there are certain legal barriers or restrictions that have been put in place preventing the carrying out of the execution. In particular, one of the barriers is the Privy Council, which in a ruling, I believe, stated that an individual who is on death row for X period of time cannot be executed. And it just so happens that that period of time is usually the amount of time it takes to appeal the sentence itself. So right there we're seeing a problem. It's not simply a matter of waking up tomorrow and resuming executions. We have a serious legal problem. We either need to abide by what the Privy Council has said and find a whole new way of dealing with this, or leave the Privy Council, which is something that we at Lands have been pushing for. The CCJ is an option, and this is an instance where we are seeing where what we as Jamaican citizens want, we're unable to get because of a foreign judicial body. Now, in light of these difficulties, there's been a petition going around asking to have pepper spray, and other less lethal items, less lethal objects, pepper spray, batons, and things like that, to be available for self defense. This petition has surpassed 15,000, and at that stage, it's supposed to, in theory, anyway, be addressed by Parliament, and this is an area that has found support from the leader of the opposition, who recently came out and said that objects such as pepper spray and tasers should be made available for self-defense. Now, there are issues surrounding how this would how much of a benefit this would have, because if the potential victim has access to this pepper spray or this taser, then the potential perpetrator, in theory, would also have access to it. So while we are giving the potential victim some protection, we're also potentially opening up a can of worms which could see the victims, in an attempt to defend themselves, being even greatly harmed. And this we think does not address the root of the problem, because at the end of the day, what we're telling our women and our girls to do is go around living on edge and living in fear, when, again, as mentioned in the previous edition, they are not the issue. The women and the girls are not the issue. They should not be looking around their shoulders every 24 seconds. They, the men are the issue, and until and unless we deal with how we as men view and interact with women, we are always going to have this problem. Next, we will turn to Jamaica's COVID-19 vaccine rollout, as well as the vaccine nationalism, which is currently playing a part in hampering our vaccination rollout. Now, recently, the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, issued a warning that we should not expect COVID-19 to be nearing its end, that it may very well be around with us for a while, and this is because rich countries have been hoarding vaccines and leaving lesser developed countries unable to access vaccines either at all or at a rate which would see herd immunity reached at a quick enough stage to prevent new variants from spreading. Now, this has also come in light of statements from the United Nations. The World Health Organization head made similar statements that we, the global humanity, should begin sharing the vaccines because we run the very serious risk of having vaccine-resistant strains mutating, and this in particular was mentioned by the IMF and the head of the UN itself, that any slowdown or any hindering, of the vaccine rollout may very well see this economic slump that the world is in deepen and sustain, and it would see those of us who have already been suffering suffer even greatly. Now, on that note, there was a recent United Nations meeting, a high-level meeting on discussing finance and development, specifically on debt liquidity. They spoke about Andrew Holness was there, and he spoke about the need for some form of fairer distribution, not only in how the vaccines are distributed, but also in how this proposed debt write-off is going to be done, and that middle-income countries, of which Jamaica is one of, should benefit from, because we, especially as a tourism-dependent nation, have been so hard hit by this COVID-19. Yeah. Now, we at Lands have been warning for quite some time about the not just possibility, but the very real reality of the vaccine nationalism, which is currently playing itself out. We have warned that it is foolish, quite frankly, to bank on one country or one set of countries for the distribution of vaccines, because there's going to be a second and a third and possibly even a fourth wave, and countries are going to, especially capitalist first world countries, are going to be looking after themselves primarily. This is yet another case where South-South linkages and integrations would be beneficial to us. We have a neighbor just 90 kilometers away in Cuba who has around 4 vaccines. They're seeking to produce 100 million by the year's end, and we are refusing to accept them. We have Russia, which has 2 or 3 vaccines, and even though we have been offered vaccines, we have refused them. Vaccine nationalism is a serious thing, and we should be wary of it, but it can be got around. We just need the leadership to do it, and if they're not doing it, then it is incumbent on us, the people, to pressure them into doing it. As it relates to the to the debt write-off, the proposed debt write-off, that again is something which should be happening. It should have happened quite some time ago, and uh, commending the Prime Minister on on bringing that point up, that us, we countries in the Caribbean who are classified as middle income, we are suffering very badly from this global pandemic, and we do need a look in, as well as the poorer countries, as it relates to some form of financial relief, some form of debt relief. Finally, we will end with foreign affairs. In recent days, there's been a letter in circulation concerning the recent coup in Bolivia, which rejects, that is the letter, the content of the letter, rejects the foreign interference in the domestic affairs of Bolivia. President Luis Arce of Bolivia welcomed the public letter, which was signed by many Latin American presidents and former politicians. And again, this letter reiterated their rejection of the interference in Bolivian domestic affairs conducted by the United States, and particularly its running dog in the region, the Organization of American States. The letter was signed by, again, 12 former presidents and 8 former ministers of foreign affairs, a Nobel Prize winner, and around 20 notable personalities. And just some of the signatures included former presidents of Brazil, Lula da Silva and Dilma Rousseff, as well as Ecuador's former president Rafael Correa and the former president of Uruguay, Jose Pepe Mujica. Now, we at Lands, we stand with this letter. This letter is something that we think everybody in the global south and every sane thinking, every right thinking individual should stand behind. It was obvious what went on in 2019 was a coup against what was going to be the the democratically elected president, the still democratically elected president, Evo Morales. It was clear that what happened was the removal of a individual and a movement which sought to not just make people's lives easier, but to have concrete, tangible differences made as it relates to the distribution of wealth in a society. It was obvious that it was a coup geared towards ensuring that a people who have always been, who have for thousands of years called that area of that continent home, should feel downtrodden and browbeaten after over a decade of finally being able to stand up and feel proud of themselves. This letter is something we stand behind and we endorse. The actions of the United States are despicable. The Organization of American States is a beast, and no good can come of it. And until more movements within the region are able to do what Mas did in Bolivia, and that is stare a coup in the face and say, no, we're not going anywhere. We are coming back, and we're coming back strong. Until we can do that, we're not going anywhere. And the first step in doing that is acknowledging who our enemies are. And this letter has done a great service in once again identifying who our enemies are. The United States, especially in this region, the United States, the Organization of American States, and Canada, which is the good cop to the United States' bad cop. We must acknowledge these realities and face them head on, or we will always be doomed to fail. Once again, this is Alexander Scott of Lands, thanking you for listening to this week's update.